available after the presentation. And I'm Brian Hamilton. I manage the channel on the SSD side of the business, which does include fixed assets. And we all know Wayne, a big part of that assets is being our lead engineer. So I won't take up any of this time. I'll go ahead and pass it off. There you go, Wayne.
Thanks, Brian. Hey, and good morning again, everyone. And Candy, since you just joined us here, can you see my screen? And you should be able to take it full screen.
I can.
Okay, good. All right. So let us do this. So right now you already have the depreciation module. What I'm going to be showing here is going to be the tracking module. Before I jump into that, right, I just want to talk about a couple of things there. It sounds like right now you don't have the assets tag, so part of this process you would be, wanting to create barcode labels, tag everything. That barcode number, by the way, is what translates to the asset ID number, right? That's the number that would be populated in the asset ID field. So we'll talk about that a bit more in a second. And you're going to be able to use either an Android app or a handheld scanner where those users can then go out, scan the barcodes, update anything that's changed, send that data back, and at the end of this all, be able to generate a reconciliation report that's going to show you what's missing. So I'll go through doing a sample inventory so you can get an idea of how this all works. Now, I do want to point out one thing. You already have the depreciation side. So really, as far as getting this done, you already have the software. It's really just getting the registration code to activate this module, right? So getting it up and running is going to be pretty easy. The users that are actually using the tracking software need a license. So you might have, let's say, 3 users using the tracking side. You could have 50 people using either a scanner or Android app. They do not need a license because what you're going to be doing, the person in the tracking software is the one that's going to be sending out an inventory list, for example, to multiple users who would be then actually doing the inventory. So these users do not need a license, just the users in the actual tracking software. Now, in your depreciation side, how many different companies do you have? Is it a single entity?
Just one.
Okay, so it makes it easy for you, right? So you'll be able to see that company when you set up the tracking module. It actually uses the same database, right? So when you go into the company, let me just give you a quick look at what you would be seeing. Now, in my case here, I'm getting this message that there are overdue assets because it also has, in addition to the inventory function, has the ability to check out assets. So when you're going in the company, if there is anything that's been checked out and has not been returned, you'd get this notification. So probably an example of use would be IT using this for checking out loaner laptops on a short-term basis, right? So when you say yes, it's going to show you the list of assets that are overdue. So all of these are things that I've checked out. They have not been returned. And I can even run a quick check-in, check-out report if I want to see some more details, actually in just a more easily digestible manner than the previous screen, because this is going to show me the tag number, what it is, when it was checked out, who was checked out to, and when it was due back, right? So when you do check something out, it's going to stamp that date, but you're going to set an expected return date so that, hey, if it's not returned by then, you'll get a notification here that on this report where you can see that these items have not been returned. So that's a function that's there. Your IT staff may or may not want to use that, but let me go into the main asset details. So I'm just going to jump into, let's find, let's say a computer here, but I do want to find something that has some attachments. Let me actually go in here. Now you can come up with whatever numbering scheme you want to. So that is not an issue, and it'll actually take up to, here, I'm going to go to one of these computers, let's say. It'll take up to 50 characters. So the main thing you're going to notice right away, right? No book depreciation fields at the bottom, because that's important. So the user is typically using the tracking module. You want them to be able to just do physical inventories, update where things are, maybe who they're assigned to, and so on, right? These general information fields are shared with the depreciation side. So all of these fields here, 28 of the fields, are shared between depreciation and the tracking module. In addition to those fields that the depreciation side has, the tracking module gets these 12 additional fields. Now, whatever customization you've done in the depreciation module, all of those are going to appear here. So if you're capturing things like, location, asset class, serial numbers, who, assets are assigned to, and so on, all of this is information that's here in the tracking module. But as I mentioned, no access to the book field, so you don't have to be concerned that they can do anything to impact your depreciation side. Any images you have linked will all be here. So as you know, you can link, PDFs, JPEGs, bitmap, and so on. So any of those you have attached to a particular asset are all going to show up there. The field I was talking about earlier, right, that handles the asset ID. So that field will take anything alphanumeric up to 50 characters. You can set the mask at whatever you want to. So right now, it sounds like none of your assets are tagged, correct? But that's one of the things you would need to be doing, correct?
Yes, we would need to be tagging.
All right. So you can, if you don't have a number scheme yet, certainly you can come up with, some type of scheme that you want to use. Might be where the first few characters, identifies a department or whatever it may be. So you can use your imagination of what's going to suit you best there and whatever number of characters you're actually going to need. Because for the physical inventory side, right, that now becomes a required field, because when you actually do an inventory, when you scan that barcode, that's how it knows what particular asset you're looking at. So it's not looking at the system number, it's looking at this field, the asset ID field, okay? Now, when you look at your asset list, everything that you have in the company is what you're going to see here. It's exactly the same database. So with that being said, right, are you capturing everything that you want to be able to inventory in the depreciation side right now? Or are there some assets you're not capturing that would need to be added?
There are assets that don't make our $5,000 threshold that we would like to track. Am I understanding your question correctly?
Yes, because actually where I'm going with that, a lot of people, for example, don't track, desktops, right? Because of the cost, they're less than $2,000. But however, right, in reality, you really don't have them in the depreciation side because you're not capitalizing them, and you really need a way of keeping track of them. So let me actually show you something. I'm going to go back into the depreciation side for a second. Because you will probably want to add those assets. Now, are you aware that in the depreciation side, there is, let me go to a US company here. I'm going to go to the same company I'm in and tracking so you can see the exact same database. But are you aware that you can actually put non-depreciable assets here? So things that, are below your threshold, for example, right? Where you don't need to depreciate them. So if you take a look at, let me go to a similar item here. So if you look at this computer, for example, right? $3,500 value, and my sample data, I'm actually depreciating them, right? So I'm doing bonus, for tax and straight line to gap and so on. But if you look in the depreciation methods, you'll see there's do not depreciate is an option, right? So let me actually find one here that I am. There is something here that I'm not depreciating, right? So if you take a look at this item, right, notice I've captured the acquisition date and service date and the value, right? I have it in here as personal property, but do not depreciate is what's selected for depreciation method. So if you take a look down below in your calculated data fields, you'll see that there's no depreciation going on at all, right? Current net book value is still the same as acquisition value, and no depreciation being calculated. So when you run your journal entry, right, you're not going to see any depreciation expense tied to this. However, if you run like your additions report, right, I'm talking about the annual activity report. If you're spending, let's say, 30 grand a year on new computers, but you don't have them in the system, when you look at your additions and your total acquisition spend for the year, it's not including that number, right? Which can be significant. Whereas if you add them in here, where you can capture all the asset details, where it is, serial number, who has it, and so on, and then use do not depreciate, it's not generating depreciation expense. But when you want to look at your additions report for the year, you can now see your total spend because you can include these expense assets as well, right? But you can, of course, easily isolate them from everything else. So definitely, I would put them in here from the depreciation side and force it to do not depreciate. So that way you can capture, what it is, where it is, when you got it, when you place it in service. And if you need to report on that cumulative spend year to date, you can do that. But of course, when you run a journal entry or depreciation expense report, there's nothing being generated by that. Make
And
sense?
it does. You would create a new company to have like a whole separate listing of those assets we're not depreciating.
You don't have to. You can put them in the same company because if you need to report on that spend in total year to date, whether they're depreciable or not, you can put them all in that same existing company. If you truly want to have them isolated from everything, now you're creating a second, subledger, so to speak. Yes, you could do that, put them in a separate company. So if you think about on the reporting side, right? Because all I have to do to include or exclude these assets is create groups. So I can create a group, for example, that includes everything except expensed assets, right? So I can run all of my reports on that. But if I also need to run a report on just my expensed assets, I can also create a group looking at that, right? So if you look at my group creation here, just to show you how I've done this, and this is keeping them all in the same company, right? So if you look at this, I just told it to look at my federal tax book, any asset, right, that the depreciation method is set to do not depreciate. And that's the group that I created for my expense assets. So I can report on them separately by reporting on that group, right? But it also applies, wherever it needs to. Of course, that's not going to count towards anything you're doing from mid-quarter, for example, right? Because mid-quarter convention is going to measure what you're doing maker's depreciation for tax. So it's not even going to offset that. So that's why most people actually put it in the same company, just use do not depreciate. So you can, probably discuss that internally and see what's better for you. Because sure, yes, I could put them in a totally separate company, right? That's just expensed assets if I want to, because you can create as many companies as you want.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So let me jump out of there, and we're going to go back into this. Now, once you've added those in, right? So if this slide is not looking at depreciation method or any of your book fields, all of the other information you capture that's shared between the two modules is going to be here. So if you're capturing serial numbers, where it is, who it's assigned to and so on, all of that information is going to be here. So now you can have in one company, if you choose, your capitalized and your expensed assets. Okay. All right. So let's do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through doing a sample physical inventory so you can get an understanding of what the process would look like. Now, of the folks on the call here, right, are all of you just from the accounting side, or some of you would be the ones that would be actually using this module?
We're in the same.
Oh, wear multiple hats. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, in many cases, they're, totally separate groups. So, okay. All right, that's why I made sure I showed you this slide that, hey, it's safe, they can do it, but they can't mess up anything to do with depreciation. So let's do this. I'm going to use just a smaller group of assets here. So I'm going to use this little group I have created. So it's just 19 assets, and we're going to do a sample inventory so you understand what the flow is and how this actually works, right? So here, I'm going to define a new inventory. And we'll just, what month are we in? May here. All right, just name it May inventory. You can name it whatever you want to. Assign it to me. Now, here's the first thing I want you to notice. Notice that there's two different types of inventory, right? Baseline inventory would be for assets that are not in the database. So here's a typical scenario for that, right? Let's say you're opening up a new location, right? And none of those assets, these are all things you're just buying. They're not in the system. You want someone to go out there, stick a barcode label on there, and start the process of adding them. Remember, they cannot provide book information fields, so they can just provide some general information of what it is and where it is and the tag number they put on it, right? That would be a baseline inventory. Dynamic inventory is if for your existing assets, you want, multiple people to go out, conduct a physical inventory, update anything that's changed, and even be able to add assets while they're doing that as well. That would be a dynamic inventory because they already exist in the database, right? So that's what we're going to do today. So I'm going to use that smaller list of 19 assets, right, as my inventory list. Now, when you push the inventory list out to these devices, be it an Android app or a handheld scanner, you can choose what fields you want to push out, and you can actually even save that as a list. So I've got a list of fields here. So I'm just going to be capturing, of course, the asset ID field is mandatory, so you can't change that. But for me, I'm just going to use, what it is, of course, where it is, including, in my case, building number, floor, room number, whatever the case may be. Also, I'm capturing who it's assigned to, right? So you can choose what information you push out. Any of the fields you push out to these devices, the user that's conducting the inventory can actually update this information. So you want to be mindful of what you want them to be able to update while they're conducting that physical inventory. Okay. All right.
Wait,
So
let's stop you right there and just ask a quick question to make sure I
sure.
understand. So we have one company, but we have multiple building
Locations.
locations. So like
Mhm.
we've just done, maybe we'll go out to our Atlantic site and inventory that. I'm assuming that in the example you just showed, we could just push out the Atlantic items on our device to go inventory that one center. Am I understanding correctly?
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct. So especially if you have multiple locations, that's typically how it's done. Now, what I'd recommend is the first time you do this is you send the entire inventory list out to everyone. And why is that, right? You may not be 100% sure of what's where. So this would be a perfect time during that initial inventory that when they're scanning, they're confirming that, hey, I'm at the Atlantic site and that's what it shows for a location for this asset, right? And they can fix it if it says otherwise, right? And then going forward, sure, you can break up the list into who's actually going to be doing what. Because when you send that entire list out to multiple people, even if they're working different sites, when you're doing the reconciliation, accepting the data back in, it's going to merge all the responses back together, right, from the different devices. So that way you can update everything. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and prepare a reader. Now, as I mentioned, right now we have Android OS of it. So there's an Android app, or you can use a handheld scanner, and actually some of those newer scanners use Android OS. When using that, it's going to send the data out over Microsoft OneDrive. So what I mean by that, it just needs to be a device that has a Wi-Fi connection long enough to pull down the inventory list, and that's the only time you need to be connected. They can go off, do the inventory. Once they're finished, they can reconnect to Wi-Fi, send the data back, okay? So I'm going to send this out to my Samsung phone, which I'm going to share the screen so you can see that. And it is going to send it out over Microsoft OneDrive. So I've got to sign into my OneDrive account here. All right.
So those of us with Apple phones are out a lot.
For right now, it's still on the product roadmap, but as you know, with Android OS is open source, easy to get development done and approved, right? Apple, you need your firstborn, your DNA history, the works before you could get anything done. So, all right. So that's
I have
been
a quick
sent.
question for you. On when you first
Sure.
started this inventory, you were talking about baseline versus dynamic, and usually we have a mixture of the two with some brand new assets that, let's say, came in the door last month that I would need to tag, but also the majority being previously tagged. So would
Right.
I have to do it twice?
Nope, you're going to do a dynamic inventory because while they're doing a dynamic inventory, you can also add assets there,
Okay.
which I'm actually going to do. I'll show you that as well. All right, so here is my Android phone, right? So you all can see that?
Yes.
All right, so let's get in here. All right, so of course, this app is already in the Google Play Store, download it for free. And, you're good to go. So the only thing that's required once you've got this in there is that you need to be able to access that same OneDrive account that whoever is pushing out the inventory list is signing into, right? All right, so if you look at this, you see I have a previous inventory I did back in December. The status is showing complete. So of course, if I click on that, it's going to say, hey, this has already been completed. No further edits can be done, right? Because that's a completed inventory. I'm going to tell it to download or check for new inventory. So it's going to sign into that same OneDrive account. And now it's going to allow me to download that inventory list that I just created. And here it is right here, 19 assets, right? May inventory. We're going to download that inventory list. And now you can see this one is showing a status of in progress. If I go into it, it's actually going to show you everything in the list, of course, but it's going to keep track of where you are progress. So if you notice here, it's showing the total number of assets and it's showing 0 new assets added. So yes, you can add new assets, right? Nothing found because I haven't scanned anything yet, and 19 not found, which is my total, right? So let's actually do this. I'm gonna click on the barcode here. And I've just got a printout of my labels. I have auto scan turned off, right? Because it would go by so quickly, so when it sees a barcode, you wouldn't be able to see anything. So I'm gonna just manually tell it, hey, scan the barcode. And you can see it's going to update the status to found. I can update any of these fields as part of my inventory. And if you go back here, you'll see status has changed. It's showing 1 found, 18 not found. So in the real world, right, you're going to have auto scan turned on, and you're simply going to come through and scan these. Now, I'm going to just do a few where I'm going to change nothing here, but I want to change some fields on a couple of these. And I'm also going to add new assets. So here, there's a few with no changes, right? See, it auto updates, right? And I'm going to change some data on a couple of these here. So let's say, you know, as they're doing this, right, the location is wrong or building is wrong, you know, whatever the case may be, or it didn't have the information. So that's why I was suggesting the first time you do this, send the entire list out to everyone, because then they can validation check, right? Hey, I'm in the Atlantic building and this has no location, or it has, you know, location something else, right? So let's say I'm going to just change this to
Scott, yes, gamers.
right, and I can update, you know, multiple fields at one. I'm just going to change building number, floor number, room number. Right? And I can update anything of the fields that were pushed out, right? So now you can see 5 found, 14 not found, right? So let's say the person doesn't finish it in one shot. You can get out of this and into this, go back a different day, right? And if you go back into it, it's going to show you exactly where you left off, that, hey, you've got 5 found, you've got 14 not found. What if I don't want to scroll through the list and, you know, be looking for all of these things? Certainly, if I just hit the barcode, whatever I scan is going to pick up. But if I just want to see the shorter list, right, I can simply in search, just type in not found. Quick way of filtering it out. So now I'm only seeing in my list the items with a status of not found. Here's the other side of this. Excuse me. Let's say, you know, you go back in, and as you're going through the inventory, you come across some asset that, hey, the tag's been ripped off, right? Those kind of things happen. So you have now no idea. Let's say it's an IT asset. I can search based on any of the information. If I start typing in, let's say, part of a serial number, right, or part of an express service tag, or even the description field, I can narrow it down, right? So I can maybe start, okay, this is a Motorola or something like that, right? I can just start, and now I filtered it down to 4, so it's one of these, right? Or the other side of this, I could certainly, I'm just going to go back here. I could certainly be searching based on part of a serial number, right? So let me see. I don't remember. I'm just picking a number. Okay, here you go, right? So if I knew the full serial number and typed it in, I would go to that one asset. And what do I gain out of that? The tag is not there, so I don't know what the tag was, right? But now I can see, hey, here's the tag number that was assigned to that asset. I can simply now reprint that label, right? And I know exactly what should have been on it. And of course, you can update, you know, anything any piece of information here. So here, I'm just going to go ahead and change this as well. Let's just say I'm changing who it's assigned to.
So the tag
And-
number would stay the same. You would just reprint the label.
Exactly, because that's what's in the system for that item. Now, if I needed to change the tag, right? Obviously, you know, if you look at this while I'm doing this, I can't change the tag number. See, that's grayed out. That's what the system has assigned to it. So if someone needs to change a tag number, it has to be someone in the tracking software, right? So you could certainly come in here and say, hey, you know what? I'm just going to stick a different tag on there, and you put a note, you know, in there, or take a picture of it if you want to, so that whoever is in the tracking software side can then update that tag number. Okay. All right. So
What do
remember
you
the other
find
side of,
people print these tags on?
oh, okay. So you can order pre-printed labels, right? You can order that through us, and you can have it configured, whatever information you want, company name, you know, logo, you name it, right? It also has the ability to print labels, right? But it's a limited capability tool. So for example, I came up with a numbering scheme. I'm just going to throw in a number range in here, right? And I can put in, you know, whatever I want to across my top line, right? Different size stock you can use, so depending on the kind of printers you have, what kind of labels you buy, and so on. But it's going to be very limited with what it lets me do, right? So if you take a look at this, it's just very basic. Now, with the labels you can order, you can have company name, phone number, information on all sides if you want to. Excuse me. Getting over a bug here. It's not completely gone. Anyway, and of course, the asset tag number, which corresponds to that barcode. So you have more flexibility if you order the different types of labels. If everything is internal, inside, you know, indoors type assets, you're probably just going to use the laminate type labels. If you've got assets that are outside, you know, in the weather, then you might want to get a mixture where some of those metal, aluminum type labels. So there's a variety of types you can get. So
Thank
it'll be Okay. All right. So let me go back here. Because the other scenario we wanted to do, of course, is adding an asset. So how do you do that, right? You simply, you know, whoever's out doing scanning those existing assets, let's say you ship some new computers or something to that location, they can simply go here, add asset, stick a tag on there, right? Scan that in, because this is the only time you can actually update this field, when you're adding something new, right? So let me look up something that's outside the number range here that I'm using, and that, of course, you can populate as much or as little information as you can. So let's say this is just gonna add to the name because I have so many computers in here, so you can tell exactly what it is, right? Right, so it's going to be definitive when we actually show that. Now, if they know, you know, what department they are, right, you know, certainly they can populate as much as they want to, right? You certainly should know which location you are at. So I would at least, you know, be sure they're doing that, down to building number, room number, you know, whatever information you have. Or even if you don't know where it's going to go, sure, you could, you know, put storage or something else, right? So I'm going to just leave these blank for now.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
We have multiple centers with dental and medical. Is there a way, like while I'm down the dental wing, to filter by the dental department so I'm only seeing assets that are dental?
Sure. You would use that same filter that I showed you, just type in at the top. If one of the fields you pushed out is that department name, dental, you just type in dental, you'll only see the assets that have that department listed.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So here, actually, since I'm talking IT assets, any serialized assets, you know, be it dental equipment, IT assets, whatever it is, good time to capture that serial number, right? So you can populate that. And, you know, if you're keeping track of who it's assigned to. So literally, whatever information you want to populate that you've pushed out, you can capture, right? Save it. And now you'll see 1 new, 5 found, 14 not found. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually stop adding anything new because I want to show you what the reconciliation process looks like, including how it treats items that are not found. Because for you on the accounting side, well, actually you're on both sides, this is what's important to you, right? Ghost assets, because you need to know what's MIA, right? And why. And well, you guys are a nonprofit, are you?
That's correct.
Mhm.
You are? Okay. So in your world, right, you don't have to worry about overpayment of taxes, but certainly you could have overpayment of insurance premiums, right? If you're not self-insured. But either way, you want to know when things are missing, and I'm going to show you how that will come out in the report. All right, so I'm going to just tell it I'm finished here. So I'm going to go ahead and send this data back. We're going to upload this. Going to send it back through the same OneDrive account. All right, so it's successfully uploaded. So now you can have multiple inventories going, by the way. So, you know, if you want to break this up into different departments and so on, you can absolutely do that and have different people handling the different inventory list. So I'm just going to tell it to receive the data. It's going to show me all the devices that I pushed that inventory list out to, right? And when I receive the data, it is going to show me how many records it's getting from each device, right? And if you're doing multiple devices, it's going to actually merge the data together, right? Now, it's asking me here, hey, have you received the data from all devices? In my case, yes, because I only had the one. But if your case, if it's multiple, right, it's going to give you a last chance. If you've grabbed several of them, hey, did you miss any? Is there any additional ones? So now I'm going to say OK here, and now I'm going to go through the reconciliation process. So this is where it's going to walk you through assets not found, anything found with changing, anything new added, and anything with no changes. For assets not found, right, you don't have to sit here and go through all of this, but one of the things you'll probably want to check here is anything in that not found list, has they been checked out? You remember the check and checkout report we looked at earlier? So if you're using that feature, I would probably run that check and checkout report so whoever's doing a reconciliation can look and say, hey, you know what? This laptop tag number X was checked out to Wayne. That's why it's not found during inventory, right? Because I can now come in here and I can confirm, right, things that have been checked out and filter them out of the list. Other than that, the rest you're just going to hit apply to all because I don't have to worry about reconciling that data because they're going to all show up on the reconciliation report. Anything found with changes, it's going to show you the original data, right? And it's going to show you whatever was changed in blue. Now, you don't have to sit here and review all of this, right? Because you can en masse accept it. So as long as you trust whoever's doing the inventory, you can just say update, apply to all, be it, you know, 1 item or 100 or 1,000 items that were updated. As soon as you hit confirm here, it's going to update those fields both in the depreciation module and the tracking module for those shared fields. So you don't have to change it in 2 places, right? Next up is going to be anything new added. Now, I only added the one computer and I can say here, yes, I want to add that asset, right? If it's multiple, you can just hit apply to all. Now, in your depreciation side, are you all using asset templates?
Yes.
Okay, so those are also available here. So when I go to add this asset, right, it's saying, yes, do you want to add it? It's going to ask me if I want to use a template.
Okay.
Now, keep in mind that this module has no access to the book field. So when you apply a template here, it's only going to apply in general information field info, like, you know, department, class, GL account, even if they were not fields that this person updated, right? So I can say yes, and I can tell it which template I want to use, right? So I'm going to use one of my computer templates here. I've got multiple, right? And now it's created that asset. Then, of course, anything found with no changes, which will be the vast majority of anything, you just hit apply to all to accept that. And then once you've finished, it's now going to generate that reconciliation report. So I'm going to tell it to run. and I'm going to run it for that specific inventory list that I just used. And this is what's going to give me the report that is showing everything that's missing. Assets not found with a status code of N. I can simply search based on that tag number and now do a disposal of these assets to figure out what's going on. Or if you want to do a deeper dive investigate, you can certainly export this to an Excel file or something, circulate it to other departments, locations, see if they're in storage, is someone working remote that has it that you didn't think of, you know, anything like that, and figure out what's going on. But this is what's important to you, having this list of what's not found because these are missing, right? Anything found with no changes, status of O, you really don't care. Anything with changes, status of C, again, you really don't care. This is what's important, right? Now, for the assets you added, right? If you go to my asset list here, I'm just going to go back to my full set of assets, right? And you'll see this is the last asset I added. Now, if you notice, when I did it, I only populated a few things, the tag number, where it is, and the serial number, and I think who it was assigned to. But when I told it to apply the template is what populated the other information I had, such as asset class and GL account or any other information in the template. But keep in mind, it cannot populate book fields. So the question for you is now, yes, easy to find it here in the tracking module where I just added, right? How do I find this in the depreciation module? So let's take a look at that. Gonna go into the same company, right? And just ignore the book fields because I'm in a standard US company here. So if you look at my main asset list, right? If I've added nothing else since then, and you see I'm looking at all complete assets, you don't see it here, right? So why is that? Because it's an incomplete asset. It has no depreciation information. So if I go to my list of incomplete assets, there it is right there. Because remember, when you add anything from the tracking module side, be it from the scanner or in the system, it has no idea what you want to do for depreciation. You can only populate general information fields. So now someone in your group would need to be the one to give it, you know, hey, the acquisition date and service date value. If they've linked, let's say, the invoice, you know, you can have that information when it was bought and so on, right? But one of you have to populate this. And actually here, I'll go to your nonprofit so you can see it, how it would look in your world. I'm not sure if I have any over there, but let's take a look at that. All right, so I do have one in here, right? So this is what it would look like for you and the nonprofit company type, because you're not going to have, you know, tax books, right? So this is what it would look like for you. And then once you've given it this information, right, now it's ready to start depreciating. But you do need to tell it when you got it, place it in service, right? And that's value, and then you can give it a depreciation method in life. Okay. Any questions about that?
Yeah.
All right.
Good.
All right, and that's basically how this side of it works. You know, there's a few reports in here that you might want to run. You know, if you want to run a quick asset listing report with just some basic information for, let's say, assets in a particular department, right? I could, you know, run that. If you're capturing the value field over here, by the way, which you can, then you have some basic info of what it is, right? What it is, where it is, right? And how much it costs and the acquisition date. So you could run something like this, you know, for a particular department, because of course, since you can export everything out to an Excel file, if you need to, you know, our multiple file types here, if you need to send this in a PDF or Excel to someone that, let's say for insurance valuation, you can do that. And it's going to have a total of the value of the assets at that location. But from the depreciation side, of course, you know, you have infinite number of reports you can run. So that's basically how this side of it works. Now, when you say that you all will be living in both worlds, meaning handling the depreciation, but some of you would also actually be here in the tracking module software, but would you also be the ones out going scanning and doing the actual inventory?
Yes.
Yes,
Oh,
I
wow.
just
Okay.
have a question for you on that, though. I was just thinking, typically we're the ones that complete the full inventories, but if like our facility maintenance manager knew that something was being disposed of and he had a
Mm.
scanner, could he dispose of it in the tracking module? Would he start like his own inventory and just dispose it? Because right now we've got a lot of emails going back and forth on things like that. Things go out the door that I don't know about, and
Okay, so here's what you can do, right? Let me actually, because they don't have the ability to do transfers or disposal, right? And I'm just looking here to see. Probably the best way to do this is use one of these fields that they can change the status on.
oh, okay.
But it needs to be one that's shared between the two. So if you were using one of these general information fields, or let's say like the custom date field is probably a good one. If you change this, one of these date fields, right? And I would name it something like to be disposed, right? Or change to dispose, right? Whatever it is that makes sense to you. Here, I'll just do, right? Change to dispose, right? And it's a date specific field, right? So now you'll see that's changed. So it could be as simple as they can simply update it in the records here that, hey, this is to be disposed, or you can push out a list. And because, they only on the app or scanner side, right? They can only act if someone has sent them an inventory list from here, be it static or dynamic, right? But whoever has access to here can simply come in here, right? And just put a date here. And then you all can simply search based on a date range. Hey, anything to be disposed this month, right? And you'll see the date. They can put a note or some other information, right, as to what's going on. So you can certainly do that. But you all on the depreciation side have to do the disposals. They can notify you by using one of these fields here, right? Or they can simply run a list, right, and export that, send to you. And so one way or another, you can set it up that they can notify you.
Okay.
Other people that I've asked about this, usually it's been the IT team, right? They'll have, let's say they're replacing some computers, and that's, excuse me, one of the things they ask, can I just name that field disposal date so they know what date it was disposed? And so you could do something like that, right? Or it could be just a field that says, disposal status, right? Because these fields down here capture what's happened if the asset was disposed on your side, so they cannot update these fields, but the general information fields up here they can, right? So,
Okay,
and that
thank you.
way, on your side, you can simply search, based on that date range. And let's see, what did I name that field? Oh, it was changed to disposed. There you go. So let's see. Oh, I'm in the other company. I'm just going to go back to that company just to show you what it would look like on that slide. Forget I'm in a different company here. So if I search, now I can simply go and search based on a date range, right? So see, I named the field change to dispose, and I can say, hey, search, remember you have different operators, is between, and I can say, hey, I want to find everything that's, flagged to be disposed in May, right? And now I have my list of assets that someone has changed either from the app or in the application, assets that are to be disposed this month. See where I'm going? So you can really kind of, tweak this to whichever way works better for you. Do you want them to actually put in a disposal date, right? So you could use that custom date field for that. Or do you want them to just have a field that says, hey, status disposed, and use that field? So it's completely up to you. So here's the one I changed, right? Because I can search based on the date range. So, and this way it can give me a definitive look at within a certain period of time of when things are to be disposed. Whereas if I just use a field that just says, hey, this is to be disposed, right? I don't know when, right? And as if I remember to look, I'm searching for that, right? Whereas this, I can just look based on the date range, right? And then once I've, of course, go through my disposal process, right? The status is going to change to disposed. So if I forgot it, right, it's going to be active and I wouldn't have disposed it yet, but I can certainly go back and look at anything. Hey, for April, did I miss anything? Anything with a disposal date in April and the status is still active? Oh, I forgot to do it. So I just want you to think about why this way may be better, right? But it's certainly up to you. But to me, this makes more sense doing it that way.
Can you show me one more time how you searched for the current month for that field?
Oh, sure. So when you go to the search here, right? And I can search within the current group that I'm looking at, right? And I just change which field I want to search by. Remember, you can search by, calculated data, static data, you name it, right? So all I did was go to the field that I had renamed, and it was changed to dispose is what I named it. I don't know why I picked that. And then I changed the operator instead of being is, because this would be for a specific date. You have a variety of operators, right? I could use is or is not equal to if it's a value, for example, right? Or within a value range. And I use in between, right? And looking at a date range. The same thing could be done if I want to find assets within a certain value. Like right now, if you decide to start putting all of these assets that are expensed asset that you don't have in there, and you want to create a group, isolating them, for example, I can even search based on that. So I can look at acquisition value, right? Oops, not date. Acquisition value. And I can, for operators, I can say is equal to or less than, right? So is it 5,000 and less, or is it 49.99 and less? So whichever it is, right? So if it's equal or less than, I would do that. Or if it's less than, I would just be using less than, right? So let's say I'm going to use anything that's less than 5,000. And I find all, right? And I've got quite a few things, 372 items that's less than that. So I can take action on all of these together. But to create a permanent group, let me show you how you would actually do that, right? And actually, I may have one here already. Here, I'm going to use $5K, let's say, right? So all I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it to look at the acquisition value field, right? And I'm using the same parameters here, right? I'm telling it anything that is less than, and I've now created a permanent group so I don't have to search for it, right? And anything that I add where the acquisition value is less than 5,000 will automatically show up in that group. So this is a temporary group. So if I go to my full list, now if I want to see everything in here at any point that's less than 5K, right there, right? So, and that's for the tax book, right? I told it to look at a particular book. In your case, you'd be looking at your internal book, but you can set different parameter. Oops, here you go, 5K, my 372 items. The other one was assets over 5K. I forgot I had one created. So this is the group. So you can create, whatever subset you want. Because remember, any of these groups you create, if you want to run a report, be it whatever report it is, let's say depreciation expense or whatever it is, I can run it for all my assets, but any of those groups I created, I can now easily do that, right? So the assets less than 5K group I just created, I could run my depreciation expense report looking at that subset. So it gives you, more flexibility with your reporting for things you want to isolate. Okay. Any questions about that? And that's my, see, remember the depreciation expense report shows you what group you run the asset, the report on. So that works pretty good. All right, so let me jump back over here. Any questions at all then about the physical inventory side of things? The others have been awful quiet. Are they all good?
I think so. I was just looking through. So since we don't have Androids, I guess we would get the scanner for this.
Sure. And Brian, you can probably ping Dwight if you need to get some pricing on those scanners.
Wait, Dwight or Ellie? I think Ellie's aligned to
Oh, okay, Ellie. Yeah.
Eastern Shore. Yeah. Mhm.
We have the Sage Fixed Assets module, and it's like a subset of the current module that I have.
Yeah. So this is you remember the Sage Fixed Asset Solution is the depreciation module, the tracking module for physical inventory, and then there's a planning module for handling CIP as well. So if you're doing a lot of renovations or project things like that, even software, distribution, whatever, any kind of projects, there's a module that handles that as well. So if you have a lot of CIP, just let us know. We can, schedule some time to show you that as well. Is that something you have a need for now or no? Recurring CIP projects?
I don't think so.
No.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Oh, okay. All right. So yeah, the tracking module would be all you need then. So you're good.
I think so.
And then account on the number of scanners you think you may want or need.
That's something, honestly, that's something, Brian, that we would have to probably sit back and think about a little bit in terms of who we want to have access.
Sure.
And then we could, if you give us a little bit of time and a chance to talk, we could probably come up with a head count fairly quickly for you. But
Okay.
off the top of my head, I wouldn't hazard to have that today.
Okay, no problem. Well, very good. If there's no more questions, again, I did record this, so I'll get the recording formatted and get it out to you.
Okay, that would be great, and we appreciate y'all's time today. It's an interesting solution and
Absolutely.
something that I think we'll have a pretty in-depth discussion about it here, and then we'll be back in touch with you. And if you could get that recording to us, we would appreciate it.
Will do. Thanks, everybody, and have a great weekend.
Thank you
All
so
right,
much.
All right. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.
You too. Thank you.